Are you a vapor? Are you an ex-smoker? And did that vaping help you get off the wicked weed? Why did you start in the first place? Why did you stop? What reason made you stop? Was it health? Was it family? Was it pressure, peer pressure? Joining me in the studio, a friend to Radio Kent, Mike Cameron, runs SMOKO, which is a Tunbridge Wells business selling e-cigs, and you do that with your wife. Mike, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay, thanks. Now, what do you think to what you've just heard from Aaron and to what you've been reading today with this new report?
It's interesting that research and studies come out, and the ones that generally get the most headlines, it seems, are the ones that have the most damning results for whatever they're researching. So whether if it's smoking, if it's walking in the park, if it's vaping, they always get the headlines when it's not good news.
Okay, for those that don't know, let's explain what vaping, because there is a difference, isn't there? There's a difference between vaping and the little electronic cigarette thing that I'll put my hands up, I use.
Yeah. Well, the industry, the act of using an electronic cigarette is now termed vaping. Essentially, that's what everyone calls it. But you've got a couple of different devices. You've got the smaller devices that are pre-filled. So the e-liquid that goes inside of that is all pre-filled and controlled and all that kind of stuff, and it delivers a consistent amount of nicotine. The other side of the industry is the larger devices that consumers can fill themselves with e-liquids, has the ability to turn up the voltage on the battery, so you're creating more vapor. And when you referred to walking through the clouds of vapor on the street, those are generally the type of e-cigarettes that you see.
And they produce so much. You see clouds coming out of some cars. You think, hang on, is that car behind me on fire? Or is the person driving it spontaneously combusting? So let's have a look. Let's talk about what chemicals go into the vaping fluid, the vaping chemical. What's it made out of?
So essentially, there's four main ingredients. You have propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, and those two ingredients are found in soft drinks, cake mixes, ice cream, candy, chewing gum, things that we're consuming every day. You have nicotine, and depending on the e-liquid or the e-cigarette that you're using, you have varying degrees of nicotine, and then you also have the different flavors as well.
Okay. So yeah, you get this smell of fruit and all sorts of when you're walking past some of these people.
Yeah, it's interesting to see because we've been doing this 7 years, and during that time, what we found is that the most popular flavors for us are the traditional tobacco, the rolling tobacco, and the menthol flavors.
Because they want to keep the same
That's
flavor,
the closest thing.
Yeah.
People don't necessarily spend 40 years of their life smoking a strawberry milkshake flavored cigarette.
No. Certainly never did that in any of my time. And when people come to you, I would imagine that it's predominantly people who want to give up real cigarettes and they're going down that line. Do you get people coming to you who've never smoked a real cigarette before but vape?
Very, very, very rarely. Very rarely. I would say 99% of our customers or the people who walk through our door or order online, they are people who've been smoking for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it may be. We've got customers who've been smoking for 50 years. And, they come into the shop and they obviously want to make a change of what they're currently doing right now. They've tried every other nicotine replacement therapy or quit smoking therapy out there. So for a lot of people, it's the last resort to actually make that change.
I have to say that, it was for me. Over the years, I've tried the patches, the gum. I even went to a hypnotist. I was the only man acting like a chicken with a fag hanging out the end of my mouth. So it really didn't work for me. What about regulation? How tight are the regulations as to what goes in? You've explained what chemicals go in, but who oversees that? And I would imagine that do they come from abroad on the whole, or what? How does it work?
Now that's a very interesting thing because the industry has changed dramatically in the last 7-10 years, and regulation came in across all of the EU, and it was called the Tobacco Product Directive. So that came into effect in May 2016. Now the Tobacco Product Directive, its goal was to limit the amount of nicotine that a consumer could inhale or induce. limit the power of the devices that they're using, and ensure that the ingredients that are going into the e-liquids and going into the e-cigarettes are tested, and they don't contain any bad things like diacetyl or that sort of thing. Now, it took us about a year and a half to prepare for those regulations. And what we've done is all of our e-liquids, so all of our ingredients and flavors, which are all made in the UK, which is a bit of a rarity in the industry.
Because China's a huge part of the market, isn't it?
China produces probably about 100% of the e-cigarettes in the world.
Right.
But they produce also the e-liquid that goes into many e-cigarettes, or they just produce the hardware. So we have our batteries made over there, but our e-liquids are made here.
Yeah.
So we've had all of our e-liquids tested. So we know that there's nothing bad in it. All of our hardware is tested. So when someone uses our device, we know that there's a consistent amount of nicotine being delivered. The regulations also talked about the actual size of the bottles that you can sell to consumers, and that was meant to be 10 milliliters.
Right.
And of course, there's a lot of other things like not selling to under 18s and not promoting to kids and. Which is obvious.
Not saying, hey, this is great.
Absolutely.
Try this.
Now, all of this is regulated by the MHRA here in the UK.
Right. Okay.
But what's interesting is that since the TPD came into effect, they are now certain vape retailers who are selling the nicotine solution in a 10 ml bottle that's been regulated, that's been tested.
Yeah.
But then what they do is they then sell a 50 ml bottle of e-liquid with zero nicotine, which isn't tested and isn't regulated. Okay. So they've found a way to get around these rules and regulations that were set to protect the consumer. And a lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
They come in and like, why don't you sell the big bottles of e-liquid? It's like, because I know more about this than you. So we're trying to protect you.
I'm working with the law, and I'm not trying to find a little loophole. Yeah, absolutely.
So unfortunately, the industry has turned a bit of a corner where, you are getting some retailers selling unregulated, and I use my air quotes on that, but e-liquids that haven't been tested and submitted to the MHRA and follow the stringent.
So finally, basically, because the news is upon us, if you're going in and you're going to buy vaping stuff, you can ask the person telling you, has this all been regulated? Is this the pucker stuff? And those are the questions to kind of ask, aren't they?
Absolutely. And as well, Cancer Research came out with something earlier this year, and as I mentioned before, the industry is twofold. You've got smaller devices that are a little bit more controlled, and then you've got the larger devices. Cancer Research, who have now, after many years, supported and embraced e-cigarettes and vaping, have always suggested that you use a smaller device as well.
Okay. So it limits it.
So it limits the amount that you're taking in.
Yeah.
But anyway,
it's a fascinating subject, and it really is. And Mike, thanks so much for coming in and kind of clearing up a few little things.
I appreciate that. And if I can just make one last thing, I think it's always important that when people are doing research and talking about e-cigarettes and vaping, that they're comparing it to people who are smoking cigarettes, because as you mentioned before, we don't get a lot of people who've never smoked come in, and we turn them away.
Yeah.
Why do you want to use this?
Exactly. It's ridiculous.
These are the people who are smoking, and you need to compare apples to apples, as I always say.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Mike, thanks so much. Thanks for coming in this morning. Really good. So what do you think?